Yeah, hi, my name's Jeff Prentice, and I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about typography, beginning typography, in use in maybe a beginning design assignment, where we're looking less at typography you'd find maybe later on in a program where you're talking about the readability of a font and the guts of typography, and more about just starting out, dipping your toe in, and considering the way I like to start people out a lot of times with typography is to consider the type as a graphical element. Stop thinking about it as text. Stop thinking about it as a word necessarily. We're going to look at how to think about text as something that works in the composition aside from the meaning of what you're trying to spell out. Very quickly, I would have you look at some of the pioneers of typography in the 20th century. David Carson Design, Raygun Magazine. He's known for the TED Talk on David Carson. Definitely check him out. Emma Gray revolutionized, the two people that founded that revolutionized typography using digital typography. It's fairly new. I mean, I had a job when I graduated from high school working at a newspaper downtown in San Diego, and they were still melting lead to make the type for each edition. So these people are look at their typefaces. Okay, A List Apart is a really good website where it just talks about good design and typography in the web. Willie Kuntz for layout. This is a Swiss designer and writer. I've used his textbook in teaching. You can't get any better than this. Okay. And then, you're going to go get as many fonts as you can. I strongly encourage that. Play with them. But remember, you're not going to be using a lot of these. Okay, the mark of an amateur a lot of times is they'll start writing paragraphs using Stony Billy and Caveman. And, some of these will come in handy, but be very judicious in their use. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples. I was doing a layout here, and I'm kind of thinking more along the lines of a Willie Kuntz, very readable, very organized kind of layout. So I'm using Helvetica Neue Bold Condensed, and then I'm just using Arial. I mean, some people, would get on me about using Arial. I think Arial's fine, so is Helvetica. But I was putting this together for a biomimicry assignment that I was doing, and I decided to have some fun with it because it was a logo. It was BioBars, right? So I'm being very playful with my type. But notice I'm not using this display font in the part that's supposed to be red. All right, so enough about just basic typography, kind of a very, very quick overview. We're in Photoshop now, okay, and I've got a canvas here, and let's say you're going to do an assignment where you're supposed to use type to communicate a concept, right? So you want to get playful with type. Now remember, on your color chips down here, the foreground color is going to be the color of your font. Let's just use black right now. And when you click on the type tool and you click on the canvas, you'll notice it creates a new layer. That is a vector, okay? That is not rasterized, all right? So that's going to maintain its integrity whether we size it up or down. So it's going to be kind of good for us to play it, with something. So I'm going to do, I'm going to type in thin, and I'm going to Control T, okay? And here's something very important that I find with my design students. If you don't hold down your Shift key, okay, you get distortion. If you hold down your Shift key, it maintains proportions, and that's kind of what I want you to do right now. What I want to do is I want to type something out here, and then I'm going to go down and click on my text tool again, and I'm just going to go through all of my different fonts, okay? And I've got pixel fonts, and I've got, which are kind of fun. Now a pixel font, okay, like where was that? Huge, okay? You would not see here where up above on this drop down where it says none, sharp, crisp, strong, and smooth. That's going to be smoothing the edges. On a pixel font, you don't want the smoothed edges because that's designed to be read very, very, very small, and you don't want any smoothing going on, right? You want it to be read like that. Watch what happens when I select sharp on there. It gets blurry, right? So keep that in mind on pixel fonts. hold down my Control T, hold down my Shift key, right? And we're just going to look through. If you're going to be using text as a graphical element, you might just need, there's my Helvetica Neue Bold, you might just need a sans serif font, okay? The sans serif doesn't have any of the decorative elements on there. Ooh, there's a nice one for thin, isn't it? Where was that? So as you kind of go around and as you start studying fonts, you're going to see some classics. Futura, right? Let's see here. I've got some Emigre fonts. You have to pay for Emigre fonts, or not, but these are really, really nice ones to have. Here's your Courier, your standard typewriter font that I've used lately, just as kind of a retro thing there. It kind of brands you when you start using some of these. Some of these can be used, but again, if they're overused, if you see them everywhere, you're going to be branded as an amateur if you start throwing these things in. So be sure that your font is appropriate to what you're trying to get across. Some of these serif fonts, see the serif there? These go back to the Gutenberg printing press, or even before, if you look into the history of fonts. So but what I want to do is I want to talk about mostly here vector versus raster. Okay, vector. I don't. That's a whole nother lecture. But let's pick a font and I can kind of give you a. Some of these are really fun, right? Base 9. So let's do. Hold on. Well, I'm just going to pick one. Sorry. There we go. Where's Futura? Futura, where are you? Here we go. Let's use Futura. Okay. So I've got it on. If you click on the text tool, you notice I'm going between the move tool and the text tool. I'm making sure I'm on sharp, crisp, or strong, and not on none, right? But I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One is to be sure that, look up vector. Vector just means that I can size this up. Watch. See how that's sized up? We're not getting any blur. Of course, you probably wouldn't because there's no curves in here. But this thing's going to maintain its integrity no matter how big I make it. And one thing I encourage people to do is the computer loves to make things huge and loves to make things tiny, right? I mean, we're starting to get huge there. Don't give me, little kind of lukewarm. Here's a medium size and there's kind of a semi-medium size. I mean, if you're talking about scale, right, then think about making things as huge as possible, okay? Now, let's copy that down. To copy it, I've got my Move tool selected. I'm going to hold down my Option key, and you can see, Option key, and you can see that little white arrowhead appear behind the black arrowhead. I'm going to copy it down. It creates a new layer, and I'm going to do Control T, and I'm going to make this one small. Okay, so think about contrast. You might be making a comparison of, like, for your assignment, it might be, fat, thin, fear, anger. It might be broken. I'm doing thin here. So so again, just pushing scale, right? I mean, that's big and small. We love contrast as humans. But now, if I'm going to do, I would also have you push contrast. Okay, I could obviously distort this by not holding down my Shift key, and if I wanted to get the idea across of thin, I could do something like that, right? But what's maybe even more effective is when it's contrasted with something that's fat, right? So, I might play with the idea of, and I've got auto select layer turned on up here, right? So I can just click through. I might play with the idea of of contrast. I always play with contrast. Fat versus thin, high versus low, soft versus hard, right? And here I have to ask myself, you know, how thin can I get? So, you know, maybe I would, maybe this would be my project because I've kind of fit the thin in between the fat, right? I'd have to think about it. Okay. Now, sometimes you need to, let me just get rid of these. Sometimes you need to actually manipulate the text and you don't want that vector object. Okay. So for example, I'm going to do broken here. Okay. Broken. Okay. So first of all, I noticed that my text isn't really, well, I guess it doesn't look black to me. Go down to the text tool, click on it. No, it's not. It's a little reddish. That's all right. So there's black. Now, if I want to start playing with the shape of this text, okay, I am going to, I want to get rid of the textual component. I want to turn this into just a bunch of pixels. I want to rasterize it. So I'm going to right click on it in the layers window and I'm going to rasterize the type. Now it's turned into an image. Okay. If I scale it up huge now, you're going to see it's not going to maintain its integrity. It's going to get all blurry. And sometimes I see your designs like that, and I'll tell you. I say you sized up something that is rasterized, and that's what I mean. Okay. So once you get it rasterized, you can only go smaller. You can't go bigger unless you want something blurred. Now, let me do. I'm going to do broken, and I'm going to do blurred for you, just to show you a couple of things. Okay. How the advantage of rasterizing this. Okay, so let's do blurred. We're going to right click on it. We're going to rasterize the type. Okay, let's say I want to give you the sense of blurred. So I'm going to actually blur the text, right? Now I couldn't blur the text as a vector, but I can blur the text once it's just made up of little pixels, right? So I'm going to go up to filter. I'm going to go up to blur. I'm going to go up to motion blur. And I am going to, blur it so you can see it. There's motion blur. I don't like it because it's all cropped. I'm going to do Control Z. Remember, you have multiple undos. What's the blur gallery? I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to get sidetracked. Here's Gaussian blur. That's more of this might not be too bad, right? Now, what about, so I could blur this and I could submit it. Oh, here's my blurred project, right? What about contrast, though? What if I selected one of these letters, moved it over, selected it with my marquee, and blurred it by hitting Control F or Apple F, or I just went over to blur and I did a Gaussian blur on it. Okay. This is where I would ask myself, obviously I might want to play with this a little bit, but I might want to ask myself, do I like the contrast between the crisp and the blurred? Okay, so let's jump up here to broken. One thing I want to show you is once I've got this rasterized, I can go in here, say with my lasso tool, and I might want to put the thing I'm going to manipulate on a different layer. How do I do that? I make sure I'm on the right layer, or the broken layer. I'm going to cut, Apple X, I'm going to paste that O on a new layer, right? So it's on a new layer. Maybe I want to do something like that to it. And then what I was thinking for broken is I could actually go and I could break this up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit V for the move tool, and I'm going to move these over. And look, I mean, if you really want to spend some time on this, I would be putting all of these little pieces on different layers. So I might have 20 different layers on that. Watch, I'm going to cut and I'm going to paste. I'm going to hit V for my move tool. I'm going to stick that in there. I'm going to hit Control T for transform. I'm going to spin it just a little bit, right? Now imagine I continue doing that Or maybe I just stop. Maybe it just needs one. That is where breaking this text apart can come in handy. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is just something, we call it lagniappe in New Orleans. And I am going to go over to my blurred layer. I'm going to cut that word out, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select the B, and I'm going to do, basically I'm going to do an edit, paste, special, paste into. Paste into means when I paste, I'll paste something right on top of something else, and I'll just keep pasting and pasting. This is going to paste it into. Okay, so I have just pasted that word into the B. Okay, and you can see that it just sets in there, right? Now, how could this come in handy? I don't know. Maybe you're doing a word called container, and you want to have it. Let's see. Maybe you're going to have it. There, I'm going to change opacity. Maybe I'm going to have a letter, and it's going to be filled with stuff, and my idea is going to be container. Notice how I changed the opacity of that by hitting my number keys on my keyboard. There's 100%, 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%, 40%, 30%. I'm going to leave you with that. I've covered a lot. Let me know if you have any questions. Have fun. Push yourself. Contrast, emphasis, and see where it goes.